So we have an hour and a half, and we are going to start with Lindixiwa, who will give us a talk on liberation songs. Are you there? Okay, there you go. Okay, and then we will follow with Yahya and then with Robert. Okay, great. Lindy, would you be able to start now? If you can just introduce yourself and give us your presentation. Thank you.
Hi, good morning, colleagues. I'm Lindixiwa Mahlaselka. I'm working for Port Elizabeth Museum. I work as a cultural history researcher. Port Elizabeth was changed just a short while back to Gqeberha. My interest here in this conference, or rather my paper, is about the representation of liberation songs. Shahid, I don't know if you allow me to share my PowerPoint presentation. Oh yes, I got it. Oh yes, yeah. So the title, and I wrote this for my master's degree at the University of Pretoria. This is my thesis. The title is Senzeni, honoring the role of liberation songs as a powerful tool that gave a voice and power to South Africa's oppressed majority in the struggle to end apartheid. Now, the title of the song Senzeni was one of the, or still remains one of the popular songs, liberation songs in South Africa today. We often hear it sung, especially during funerals nowadays. And so I thought that, and for many people, this is one of the most popular songs that come from the liberation movement. We'll hear a little bit more about it as I continue with the presentation. And so what happened is that in 2011, one of the popular liberation songs called Tubuli Bulu, which is sung by the leader of the now an opposition party, the second biggest opposition party, the EFF, who was then the leader of the ANC Youth League. He was taken to...
Nandi, sorry to interrupt you. Just to let you know that your presentation is not in full screen.
Not on full screen?
It's not in full screen.
Okay.
If you can go to...
Okay? There you go.
Yeah, that's better. Thank you.
Yes. Yeah. So he was taken to the Equality Court in 2011 by AfriForum, a human rights organization, which is largely perceived as a pro-Africans group and a reactionary group. And unfortunately, the Equality Court, guided by the Constitution, declared the song as inciting violence and hate speech. And therefore, Julius Malema and his group were banned from singing and performing it. Now, from that, it became clear to me that, one, the memory of the liberation struggle is in conflict, and at West, along the racial lines, if we continue with the perception of the AfriForum as a reactionary rather than a human rights organization. So there was one group, largely white, who remember them as inciting violence, and the other group who remember them as tools and instruments in the struggle against apartheid. So that's what the paper is about. It's about this collective memory, or rather about forging a collective memory and a representation of the liberation songs as tools rather than as inciting violence against other groups. And so in tracing the history of the liberation songs, I went back to the era of slavery. And in fact, a repression in South Africa is commonly traced back to the arrival of the Europeans, that is back in the 17th century, 1652, and the importation of slaves, which were largely in the Western Cape Town in particular, under the Dutch, and the repression that ensued after that. And we see traces of songs and performance during that slavery era from what is currently preserves that legacy today, what we call the Kapseklopse, which is performed on the 2nd of January. And the interviews that were conducted by various researchers clearly indicate that these songs were performed from the slavery era to express the protest, to protest against repression. And so beyond the African continent, we know a lot about slavery in the United States, not so much in Europe, and songs and performance against the repression of slaves. So this is a theoretical orientation, that collective memory, and which is described as how the past is organized and selected for posterity. Now, Mola describes it as a powerful tool in the quest for understanding, justice, and knowledge. And these last two, justice in particular, came through during the research that I conducted, the responses from my interviewees, that the issue even today is justice. Secondly, knowledge, or I will refer to it as education, that the songs are enabling the current generation to transmit knowledge about the past to the younger generations who did not experience apartheid. Also, I want to believe that if the whole society view the songs in a similar way, that is as instruments, then they become part of a collective memory, and as an added advantage, enable us to forge social cohesion that the current dispensation aspires to. So the significance of the study is what the Stuart Hall, an expert of representation, said, that however deformed, incorporated, and inauthentic are the forms in which Black people and Black communities and traditions appear and are represented in popular culture, we continue to see in the figures and reporters on which popular culture draws the experiences that stand behind them. So if we follow the interpretation and the judgment of the of the Equality Court in 2011, it represents the songs as inciting violence. And in other words, as savage and barbaric, just like what the colonial narratives described African cultures during the colonial and slavery eras. But we do know from the songs themselves, as the research indicated, that these were tools of educating, of raising consciousness, of demanding justice. This is what they reflect to people that perform them. Insofar as literature is concerned, I looked at the international first, with particular focus in the United States of America, where slavery, which was followed by repression, although slavery ended, but still there was inequalities, the Jim Crow era, and they explored the songs that were performed, and one of them would be "We Shall Overcome." And one of the things that came from Amen and Jamieson was that music maintains a movement even when it is no longer visible, and even when it is no longer a visible presence in the form of organizations. And we relate to this as South Africans, especially because we had organizations that were banned during the apartheid era, and especially in the 1980s, which is the period where I grew up in 1990s when they were unbanned. So the music sustained the presence of those political organizations. And then I looked at the African continent, and there's a lot about Chimurenga, this Zimbabwean protest music, which was a platform that Zimbabweans always resorted to whenever they wanted to express their grievances. And it is still the case even today. In North Africa, in all parts of Africa, West Africa included, music is a visible form of protest that freedom fighters used in their struggle against forms of repression. And then we looked in South Africa, and in South Africa, we trace it from way back, from slavery era, and quite recently during the apartheid era. And there are many songs that I looked at that were tools of protest. And just to quote Constant Martins, revolutionary songs are important instruments for memory, while also reorganizing the history of a group in order to make it meaningful and useful for the present. And this is one of the issues that the chairperson of the last session brought up, that the present is important. And so it should not be ignored and focus on the future. And this is the case in South Africa today. The current generations, they are demanding all sorts of things, where the fields must fall, roads must fall, and all these protests are using music as a forms of protesting. So I employed qualitative research. I conducted interviews, some were oral, but they were largely questionnaires that I distributed because this was during the COVID period. So I looked at people who participated in the struggle in the 1970s. I got about 3 of them, and then quite a number of people in the 1980s and 1990s. And then I looked at people who became conscious, or rather who grew up in the 1990s when apartheid was normal. And this was it was interesting to note that all of them agree on one thing, that one, the music was good for education, for consciousness, for resistance. And all of them were agreeing on the representation and the preservation of this song. And these people were using this music while they were at schools, at universities and colleges, and during the communist struggle. They are especially popular today in what is called service delivery protests, employing the same instruments that were employed during the apartheid era. And some of the songs have not even been adapted to suit them. But of course, most of them have been adapted. So these are the 5 songs that I focused on. One, Senzeni, which is, most people believe that it started in the early 50s during the implementation of the Group Areas Act in Sophia Town. And it is still sung even today. And then Nanzim Tademyama, it is believed that it was composed by Vuisilamini, who was one of the first revolutionaries that were hanged by the regime. Then Tubuli Pulu, there is no knowledge about who composed the songs, but it is closely associated with Peter Mukaba, who sang the slogan, "Kill the Boer, kill the farmer," in the aftermath of the assassination of Chris Hani in 1993. Sikhulule Tambo, there are many songs about Oliver Tambo, was the leader of the ANC in exile. And this one, Sikhulule Tambo, is believed to have started in 1985. And in fact, from 1981, which was 1980-1981, which the ANC declared as the year of the decade of liberation in Africa. And so many songs about him were composed because there was an increasing number of young people who were joining MK. Amba Kahle Mkhondo, and again, this is one popular song which is performed especially in funerals of the former liberation fighters, which is still performed even today. So it is believed that it was started in 1967 during the Wanke campaign. It was a farewell song. And so I think it is consistent that it is performed during funerals. And just to add to the point that these were powerful instruments, when Chikumati wrote that about sorry. Oh yeah, sorry. These are the findings of the analysis. Songs help us with education, with history, memory, and tradition. And they brought about unity, cohesion of the fighters, and then they raised the consciousness and they fueled the resistance against apartheid. Watiyonga, which is a Kenyan professor in the tradition of Black consciousness, said that revolutionary songs and slogans are a reflection of history, freedom fighters used them to create images which became the basis for the conception of themselves as human beings. So to conclude, the study produced undeniable proof that revolutionary songs played a significant role in the struggle, and that it is impossible to underplay the importance of preservation of this heritage going forward, regardless of whether or not they make some sectors of the society feel uncomfortable. They are part of history and as such cannot be allowed to be expunged. For example, while accepting the ruling of the Equality Court in 2010 on the matter between Julius Malema and others against AfriForum and others, that deemed the songs commonly known as the Wulibulu as hate speech that serves to incite violence, the contents of this study offers proof of deep complexity of retaining oral literature as a collective expression and a celebration of communal culture-specific related experiences which enhance values in traditional societies. Thank you. Hello.
Beg your pardon, it's me. I started speaking and didn't unmute. Okay. Thank you very much. A very informative presentation on liberation songs, and I'm sure there are, apart from Zimbabwe that you mentioned, this would be the same in many other places. And I can imagine in places like Kenya, Algeria, Guinea-Bissau, just to mention a few, where very similar sorts of situations exist. But on your last point about how the question of music and performance as complex, but also as part of shared heritage, is what Yahya is going to demonstrate and speak on. And following that, Robert will also comment on a very specific genre of Swahili music. If I could call on Yahya, if he's available.
Yeah, I'm around.
Oh, please go ahead and perform as you wanted to. But you have your performance is 12 minutes, right? You said.
Yeah. I'll make a short
okay.
presentation and I'll perform through in between.
Okay.
That is okay. Okay. Hi everybody. My name is Yahya, and I'll be doing a presentation on Qaswida as a genre of music and as a modern heritage that is found in the East African coast. I'll give a brief history about Qaswida. It's derived from the Arabic word, which means poetry. So it's generally a collection of poetry, where it was formed kings and queens in the Caliphate time, or during the Prophet's time. It used to be performed in the weddings and other types of ceremonies. Islam spread throughout the world. It changed a little bit. Like we have in Turkey, we have a Sufi kind of
Yahya, your video link is very weak.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, if you come forward, yes. While you're speaking, you might want to switch off your video, and then when you're going to perform, switch it on again.
While I'm speaking, I switch off my video.
Yes, it might just help us to be able to hear you clearly. And then when you're going to perform, you can switch it back on.
Okay, hope that helps. Okay, so I was saying this one originated from the Arabic kind of tradition, and it means just a collection of poetry. And as Qaswida traditionally was performed during the Caliphate's time or during the Prophet's time, It was performed in front of the leaders or the sultans. And later, it was adopted in weddings and other kinds of ceremonies where people enjoyed themselves, because these are generally a collection of poems and they are sung out. We have something known as maqamat in Arabic. These are the various tonations and the sounds that are used in Qaswida, and they fall into a category, because mostly in Qaswida, what is considered most is the sound more than the instrument. So the singer needs to be quite advanced and his voice needs to be good. He needs to be a very good singer in order to perform the nasheed or Qaswida. The Qaswida are divided into two categories. You have the Qaswida with instruments, and the other one without instruments, that is known as the nasheed. They are performed, as I said, using the maqamat. We have like Nahawand, Sika, and Hijaz. Hijaz is a famous kind. If you hear the call of prayer in most of the countries, that sound is known as the Hijaz. We have the Nahawand, like la 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 li la 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 li la. That sound is known as Nahawand. So we have different sounds. It's like 7, 8 different sounds that are used traditionally in singing or performing nasheed or Qaswida, and they're also used in the recitation of the Quran. So you find this kind of genre is more religious than more of just a performance. The message in the Qaswida is different because it talks about Islam, way of life. It talks about how people will live together in harmony. So for example, if it's a wedding, the wedding song will advise the man and the woman how they live as a husband and wife in a good manner in their future life. And I will do a performance of a wedding song in later during my presentation, but let me just finish the presentation first, then I'll continue. Qaswida as a modern heritage has changed, because traditionally it used to be performed during the ceremonies, but now it's being consumed differently in that it's consumed in radio. Now we have the digital streaming platforms like iTunes, Spotify. So the consumption of this music has changed from the tradition. Tradition is it was just performed during ceremonies, but now it's consumed in the TV, YouTube, and other forms of media. We find also the challenges that are facing now the genre of Qaswida. Number one, the generation of this moment do not want, or they don't put emphasis, or I can say the generation doesn't put emphasis first in learning the instrumentations, in the singing, knowing the maqamat, the different types of singing. And we also face lack of support. Like a long time ago, it was not commercialized. It was just performed during ceremonies and people were not paid for it. But at the moment, these people perform and they get paid for it. We have festivals, we have different types of, notably, today we have concerts. These concerts are done in different kinds of cities in the world. Like here in Lamu during the Maulid and Lamu festival, it's a UNESCO kind of festival funded where people perform Qaswidas and people meet, they show their tradition, they show the various types of food. The instrumentation that is used in the nasheed is basically the tambourine, the hand drum. I have one here. Maybe you can just hear the sound. Later I'll be singing with it so you'll be able to see it. We have the flute. The traditional flute was made from bamboo tree called mianzi in Swahili, but now we have a kind of modern kind of instrumentation that's being used. We have the guitar, we are using the violin, we're using the piano and other kinds of modern instruments. But a long time ago, they used to use the drum or the flute, and generally the voice, or maybe clapping of hands and tapping of the feet. Some of the changes or the styles of singing today, we have auto-tuning. This is the digital kind of minute. So we find people were not, a long time ago, remember in the beginning, I said that they used to take the best of the singers to sing. But today with autotune, anybody can go to a studio, record himself, auto-tune the music, then he'll be seen as if he's a very good kind of singer. So these are the challenges and obstacles that are facing. We also lack music producers who can make this kind of genre of music that will make people understand and feel the authenticity of the music. Another thing, we have opposition from some scholars, especially from the Salafism sect, who believe that any kind of performance in music is forbidden in Islam. So this is a general kind of obstacle to this genre of music kind of growing. Remember, during the performance of these songs, we do not allow the mixing of men and women in the performances. So we have separate kind of settings during these performances. Generally, that's what I can say about the traditional. Maybe I just do a short performance and then Robert will take from me. So let me turn off my camera so that you can see, so that I do the performance. I hope you are hearing me. Yes, and I'll start with a wedding song that I'll be performing just shortly. Then I will do shortly before I leave Robert to continue with the. So I was talking about the hand tambourine. This is what I was talking about. This kind of modern. The traditional one was made from goat skin, but this one is a kind of a tambourine that is modern, but it still gives almost the same sound. Kufanya uadilifu, sote tupeni mapenzi, sawa yenye uongofu, msiwe na ubaguzi, mkaleta hitilafu, msiwe na ubaguzi, mkaleta hitilafu, sote tupeni mapenzi, sawa yenye uongofu, uni wetu wasia kwa wale wote wazazi, kila mnapotulea, msifanye ubaguzi, na Mola ameusia heshima kuwapatia na kumpata nabia na suna kuitatia, na Mola ameusia heshima kuwapatia na kumpata nabia na suna kuitatia. So generally this song talks about parents should put equal love when they are bringing up their children. So this is more of a message to the family. And later I'll be doing, just in a few seconds, I'll be doing a wedding song just to wrap up before I leave the session to Robert. Sote tumefurahika, harusi imeshafika, bi harusi imepambika, na mumewe kadhalika, pia tumekusanyika waombea baraka, amehimiza Rabuka, ni suna ya hakika, sote tuishangilie, harusi tuishashie, wake, amepata mke wake, amepata mme wake, amepata mke wake, amepata mume wake, amepata mke wake, amepata mume wake. Yeah, so that is kind of a wedding song. So basically this is what I was talking about. Maybe I'll leave the session to Robert. Thank you very much for listening. Maybe you do the questions later. Thank you very much. Now,
Yes, we've got lots of questions for you already. Thank you. Robert, please go ahead.
Yeah. So basically, I'll just summarize. Was the work done with Yahya. We were just entertained as well here, really enjoying the music that he does. So basically, what he was talking about now is Qaswida. So I'll just be taking you through now the whole now of Swahili music. Qaswida is one of those music that we types of music for Swahili, and the other ones, of course, are the chakacha. We have Singeli, we have the Baikoko, yeah, and we have the Tarab. So basically in Swahili, those are the main types of the music that I've translated since before. And maybe to talk on the mode of consumption. Traditionally, I'll just first take it traditionally, then talk to modernity. Because Qasida, actually, this was mainly used in sacred, the concept of sacred. This is a music that was mainly under the component of sacred music. Yes. So traditionally, what we have seen and from researchers, most of this music was consumed in weddings. As you can see, he was performing a wedding song. It was consumed in burials, during childbirth, and in rituals. So these were the main consumption for the Swahili music traditionally. And when we're also talking about Swahili, we also need to understand who are the Swahili people. So according to, from research as well, of course, the main component or the main people who consider themselves as Swahili are the Mijikenda. And we also have the Arabs who came and settled here. And the other people are also called the Barawa, which are of the Somali descent, also came and settled right here in Mombasa and the coastlines of Tanzania, from Zanzibar, along the coastline up to Mombasa. So basically, those are the main people who are identified as Swahili. Yeah, so now talking you now to the modern side of Swahili, because actually Yahya here just basically to consider basically was talking about the sacred. Now the modernity of the Swahili music, just trying to compare the interest of consumption, how it is being consumed now. I find that most of Swahili music currently now is now transgendered and playing in radios, being played in hotels, it's being played in clubs, it's being played in national holidays. And also one of the other unique things that we find most of Swahili music being played is during festivals. Like we have the Lamu Festival, which is a very known festival, and this is one of the main avenues where a lot of Swahili ancient has been found to be played, and a lot of foreigners, both within also and outside, have really appreciated just through the Lamu Festival. So we have seen that there's been a different angle of consumption as how we are viewing how it was being consumed before, traditional, and now in the modern times. Yeah, I would also to mention the online platform that we currently have. Like Yahya now basically uses YouTube, iTunes to sell his music, and you'll find that it has increased his scope of audience as compared to the traditional ways, or how people are consuming music only through such kind of events. Yes. So also to talk about now the other very important aspect of Swahili music is the Tarab. The Tarab has actually really made an impact, really showcased. Yeah, Swahili pot. Sorry, has really represented Swahili music, and later on, one of our own also will be performing that, called Malenga 001. He'll be sharing his on Tarab, so we'll get to enjoy that in a moment. So one of the main through the modern people who are now doing taarabs currently, who have really shaped the Swahili music, we have B. Malaika, B. Kidude. These are musicians that you can find them on the platforms. You have Mzee Madrid Juma, you have Juma Balo. So those are the people who have really helped shape the tradition of taarab music, which has really shaped Swahili music from the coastline here. So lastly, I also want to talk about the issues actually that have arisen as to why maybe you'll find a lot of Swahili music from traditionally has not been played or is not being supported that much, and people are listening to this other form of music. One of the main things that was found is that some of the ancient music to the youth, basically we've seen since they're the most they consume this music more, maybe they found it to be boring. So those are the issues that from a recent engagement and workshops that we had, you may find that most of them associated to be boring, and maybe the tone or the type of the beats that is being used, so they are not succumb to it as compared to the modern times. So that is how these modern musicians now have tried to kind of put that linkage, of course, from the traditional, still having that message being driven at home, and considering the modern times of the beats, not changing much, but still borrowing a leaf from the traditional means, so that they can also be able to capture this audience, especially the youth, who now we can consider as the people who should now pass the mantle of Swahili music to the next generation. So those are the main issues that we have seen why some areas actually in the Kenyan coast and also in Tanzania, the youth have said, of course, the music is boring, and that has really made Swahili not go to that extra level that it really need to be. It really needs to be. Yeah, so basically those are the main issues that I wanted to discuss. But of course, today was a day also for our performance, because through this performance, I think you'll be able to understand clearly what Swahili music is, and also be able to learn and appreciate why Swahili music and culture should really be appreciated and should really be conserved and also be supported by all the partners in this workshop. Thank you very much. I think now we can welcome the questions. I hear there are questions for Yahya here. So
thank you. Actually, thank you both. That's an excellent presentation of Swahili music. But the questions are for open for all the presenters. And not just on Swahili music, although we have questions. I'm sure there are questions for both. Just by way of introduction, what interests me is that how do we think of a link between the songs of liberation that Lindixiwa was talking about and Swahili music? What were the influences, and how do we understand these influences? How did they happen? Liberation music draws from specific genres of music that already is in existence, and Swahili music obviously draws from Arabic poetry, but is also part of the development of indigenous culture on the Swahili coast. And as the theme of this conference is about modern heritage in Africa, how do we understand, I mean, we can see that the changes and the way in which it is performed now is modern, because for a number of reasons, including that it is part of new social platforms. But we also want to understand, how do we think of modern? Would we think of the origins of Swahili music, the influence of local indigenous people and the Arab influence as something that is modern and has changed over time. Because it's quite important. If you, in the previous session, previous plenary session, one of the criteria or index of modernity is change. And what we see here is both in the liberation music, which is all over the continent, and in Swahili music specifically, a constant change in the movement and the style and the use of instruments to make music. So with that, I want to open up the conversation, the questions that people might have. But of course, you can comment on my comment.
Yes.
Yes, could you want to go?
Yeah.
Please go.
Yeah, that's you raise an interesting question about what the influence is.
Yes.
In my study, I found that there was a Christian influence on the songs, especially the late 40s and early 50s. For instance, one of the songs that came up during that time is Somlandela Uluthuli.
Yes,
Chief Albert Luthuli was the leader of the ANC at the time. So the song went like Somlandela Uluthuli. So in Xhosa hymns, there is a song that Somlandela Jesus, meaning that we will follow Jesus. And these were Christians.
Yes.
So it continued when it was very popular during the Alexandra boycotts, bus boycotts in the late 40s and early 50s. But again, interestingly, the images Voisilemini with radical songs like Izabnyateli Africa, that is, Africa will trample on you, and Watch Out Verwoed, Nanzindo Demnyama Verwoed. So watch out Verwoed, here comes the black man. And so I've found these two totally influenced by totally different events. Not totally different events, I'm sorry about that. I think about the inspiration from the boycotts in Alexandra. This is what inspired Voisilemini to come up with this radical music, because those protests were quite radical, a departure from what the ANC had been doing before, which was about deputations and appeals to the government. Now it was the masses. So I find this quite interesting. I'm interested in, I looked at the inspiration for the slave music in the Dutch era in Cape Town. And I did not find any, and of course this was not really an interest, anything that would pin down what was the actually influences of this, but there were quite radical acts of resistance during the era when some slaves were even killing their slave owners and producing. So were they influenced by music or by the repression itself? I do not know. Thanks.
Thank you. That's quite an interesting perspective about where does the course of influence go? Is it from the music to the acts, or the act of repression stimulating or influencing the music? There's a question in the chat from Purity, who asks the question. Oh, well, she thanks the presentation. So all of you, thank you. I would like to hear from the presenters how the youth have influenced traditional music towards modernity. I suppose, Lindixiwa, this would also apply to you, because it's about in the post-apartheid period. Why is the same songs being used? Is it exactly the same, and you talked about it. You talked about the changes, so this would be an interesting aspect to hear about. But let me hear from Robert and Yahya first.
Yes. I think I want to respond first. Go on, yeah.
In terms of liberation music in the Swahili culture, it was there. Like we find when they were fighting the British during the end of colonialism in the 1950s, there were songs that were composed to cite the soldiers to resist the British. So this is something that was there also in Swahili kind of culture. And we find like Mombasa, generally the East African coast, has a rich history of resistance, ranging from the Europeans. Basically, we're talking about Vasco da Gama and Portuguese. We have the Arabs who came and were chased away. And then we have the local wars that were happening between the various communities that were fighting. So liberation music was also there. And during war, drums and songs were also used to psych up the soldiers so that they could fight. So this is something that also was done in the ancient time. Coming to this question that how the youth have changed the traditional music waters. Like I personally, I sing two types of, I have songs that are basically traditional and some that are a bit modern to capture the new audience, because you cannot run away from the new audience. Like we find in ceremonies like Maulid, this is basically to commemorate the celebration of the birth of the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, peace be upon him. We do traditional music because this is a traditional ceremony. But when we have private concerts, we tend to use piano, we tend to use the oud, which is the kind of an Arabic guitar. We use the flute and we also use the piano. And I personally, I play the guitar to try to spice up my performance. And I also play the tambourine as the one I showed you. It's not the traditional goat skin drum that was used traditionally during the performances, you know. So the youth today tend to love the modern instruments. So there is a change of Afro-Asian fusion in that we find that people are mixing different cultures. Like we have the Indian drum, we have the African drum, we have the Asian drum, and also the European drum, the kind of blues and hip hop kind of drum. So we find generally the different kinds of music. Like if you hear bongo flavor, as Robert spoke about, not specifically about Qaswida, you'll hear that there are influences of blues. So you have bongo flavor or Kenyan music or Tanzanian or Ugandan music that has hip hop influence and both African influence, and we also have music that basically looks like the traditional kind of Congolese music. Like the Congolese borrowed from Benga and formed their own kind of genre of music, which is known as Lingala. So Lingala music was borrowed from the Kenyan Benga music. So there is a rich tradition of music in the East Africa. Like you find in the 1960s, most of the Congolese musicians used to come to Nairobi and Dar es Salaam and Mombasa and other East African countries, like it was a hub or a haven for musicians. And they went back to their countries with after borrowing some kind of genre and style of playing the guitar, the drum, and some kind of music. So Benga, Bongo, and other kinds of East African music has influenced music in Africa. Not just basically speaking about Arabs, but there is a bigger audience that has borrowed music from the East Africa and is now bringing it to the world. Thank you.
Yeah, maybe just also to add icing there. Of course, now we can't not forget to mention technology. The youth have really enhanced this, because with technology, we can be able to capture this youth from wherever he sits currently. So the more usage of technology means to channel this the music has also catapulted how traditional music has moved now towards modernity. So that can also be appreciated as well.
I don't know if I should respond to this other question or I leave it.
You mean the question from Rafael?
Raphael, yeah.
Yes. But let me just preface this. I mean, on the one hand, we have Christianity that was deeply influential in Southern Africa. And that Christianity was could both be very conservative and also quite radical, which is the important point that was being made. But the question to pose was, what of the style or the genre of religious music? Because in both cases, we talk, both East Africa and here, we're talking about religion as the base of the influence here, or as the base of the music, but the influence then coming from different sources. And today, in the case of East Africa, particularly in Kenya, the influence of love songs, as Rafael is talking about, basically from Bollywood, I would say, now sung in Kiswahili. So he asked the question, is it a different message? Is it, has the context, has the historical context of now changed the message completely? In the case of liberation songs, if you don't get the liberation, even though you formally have independence, it might be that the content doesn't change. But in the case of Swahili music, it seems that there are a variety of different kinds of changes that have taken place. Lindixiwa, you can jump in at any time as well.
So should I make a comment, or?
Yeah, you can make.
Okay, I really agree with whatever Raphael is saying. There's some borrowing of music from the Indian, and like we find Juma Balo. Juma Balo is a legend in Tarab. He used to take Indian songs, then translate them or makes his own poetry and sing the same style using almost the same exact kind of instrumentation. So this is what he was known for. And he sings love songs. He used to sing a lot of love songs. So this is the one person who took the Persian and the Indian kind of music and made it his own. We also have other singers in East Africa who
Oops, we've lost you there.
done that.
Oh, okay.
But if you focus mainly on Bikidude from Zanzibar, she used to sing, yes, love songs, but basically mostly he used to use the instrumentation from the Arab, but he used to compose her own poetry. So this was a great poet who used to use, yes, he loved the Arabic kind of instrumentation. So he just used the instrumentation and sang using the makamat or the styles of singing in Arabic, but he used to sing his own poetry in Swahili. So this is something that has happened. Just speaking of, we also have modern singers like Eric Wainaina, who sang songs, singers who still sing generally about the struggle and the problems that are being faced either from corruption or from wars or maybe the instability that is found. Like we also have singers like Kenan. He originally came from Somalia, now he's living in Canada, who sang the World Cup anthem of "Oh, la 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 la, give me freedom." Is a nice song. So this is a liberation song found by an East African that was shared during the World Cup in South Africa that really talks about the different influences of the East African music and East African musicians. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, maybe also to mention that the issue of religion, yeah, it is
Yes.
true. Is that evidence of the Islam, which has also shaped the Swahili music. Yeah. So from ancient times, even before now, the Arabs came into being. So we also see religion also making a lot of contributions, like especially Islam, to the Swahili language, the Swahili culture, I mean, and the Swahili music. So compared to, as you are mentioning now, the liberation, those trying to compare maybe why Swahili music, its trajectory, the way it's going, and is there any correlation now with religion as compared, let's say, to to liberation music? Yeah.
There's one aspect. If let me just mention in a few seconds, Christianity has also shaped the music in East Africa. Like we find the choirs that are being sung traditionally, like we found Christianity entered, the missionaries entered with their own style of singing. You have the choir, you have the playing of the organ in churches. That is still being practiced today in East Africa. So it's not just Islam as a religion that shaped the music in East Africa, but we have the like Catholics. They were allowed by the Pope to use the African instruments in their liturgy when they are playing liturgy in church. So there is that kind of changes also in from the Roman Catholic kind of styles of singing. They have been Africanized to suit the African audience, in that they're using during their church performances and when they are praying in their sermons in their churches, they still use African traditional, and they recompose. Maybe they translate the Roman traditional kind of music and sing it in an African way. So that has also been seen in the Anglican and other kinds of churches. Then we have the influence of the Baptist or the Protestant churches, where they also sing their kind of gospel music, but with more pop color, and they use the modern instruments. I'm talking about the guitar, the rhythm, basically just like soul, R&B, and this kind of modern kind of instrumentation. And we also have Christians who still use the traditional kind of music.
What is, I mean, what is, there's an interesting question that I think is an interesting question,
like
which I want to ask, which is,
or they use the marimba, which is the xylophone.
Yeah.
So we have people who still believe also in the African music.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I want to ask this question, which is, you mentioned that there are some scholars who are resistant and argue that music in Islam is forbidden. So would you want to comment on that? Is it a strong movement? Is it very small? What has been the response of the youth to it? Does it undermine your beliefs? Does it undermine the religion? Could you comment on that?
We have a section of the original of I call him Wahhabism. Wahhabism comes from Najd. Najd is a section in Saudi Arabia. So we have a section of scholars who studied in Saudi Arabia who have come recently and are opposing use of instruments, and some are opposing totally performance and singing. But if you look traditionally in the Islamic kind of concept, we find the Prophet, peace be upon him, when he was entering Medina, he was welcomed by the singing and drumming of the people of Medina. So this is something that is present in Islamic history. So it's like a kind of contrast in that they're trying to say this thing is not allowed. Maybe, I don't know where they come from, but I respect the opinion first. But I am from the school of thought which believes that performance of
Robert and Yahya, we kind of,
music,
yeah, right, okay. I think you're back now. No, you're frozen.
Yeah. Maybe in the meantime, may I respond to Purity's question about how the youth have influenced traditional music towards modernity?
Oops.
Oops, we lost connection there. So I don't know if you got last point. Oh,
could you just hang on with your point, because
yeah.
the previous speaker, Lindixiwa was going to make a point, so I would just want him to finish making his point.
Yes.
Yeah. The point of, okay, sorry.
Okay.
Yes, I just want to attempt the question. I'm not too sure, because this is really not my area of specialty. But I think that young people are open to influences, and so they take those in their creativity, and of course using their own background, or rather their own traditional music in this sense, and put in those elements of influence. For instance, in South Africa, we have quite a number of genres that are coming up in the music sector, especially popular music. One, I think in the 1990s period, we spoke about Kwaito music. And quite recently, we have what is called Amapiano. But when you look at this closely, they resemble what before was called rap music, which comes from the blues era. So I would say that. Also, the influence of Christianity on protest music. I don't want to to give too much credit to Christianity. I want to go to what Steve Biko shared about music, that this is something that Africans have in their daily lives to express their feelings, or the emotional state, as he put it. So I think this is something that is within people. And in this, I remember an exhibition that was at the Psalms Delta Museum, which is a small town in Paarl. I think the museum is closed now. They had an exhibition about music. And one of the things that stood out for me was that the exhibition explored a little bit about what comes first between the words, the language, and music. And one of they in answering that question, they said that music comes first. And they, for example, they said when parents or adults speak to or communicate with the babies, toddlers, those who have not yet in an age of speaking, we sing. I mean, if speaking to a 5-month-old toddler, one would say, ulu, ulu, ulu. It just happens naturally that we do a little bit of music to communicate with them. So this is an indication that music is within us. And of course, the cultures have influence on music that gets performed. I wanted to make that point. Thanks.
Thank you. It reminds me of a question of a professor at Wits University who asked the question, how musical is man? Of course, this was a very long time ago in the 60s. But basically asking the question, how musical are human beings? And how integral is it to our lives? And so I do take your point about it's not about trying to trace exactly what the influences were, even though it's important to do that. It's more about what is the music saying to people in the present. And I don't know if Robert and Yahya want to comment on that as well.
To comment on the evolution of music in South Africa?
No. In the case of the East Coast of Africa, so I mean, there is an obvious religious influence, and
there is
it's
a lot
not
of religious influence in
yes.
kind of music, either African traditional religion or Islam or Christianity. That is there. And you also have Indians. So there is a mixture of kind of influence in the type of music people make. So religion is a big part of it. Yeah.
Yes, religion is a big part. But what I think I'm trying to get to this question here about. So, what is the role that music plays in both the emotional and in changing people's ideas? I mean, clearly, you've talked about the religious influence, but also you've talked about other kinds of influences coming from Bollywood, for example. But is the message that you are sending, when it is based in a religious ritual, and a message from a love song from a Bollywood movie, surely what the message is are two different things? Or is it possible, for example, to take a love song and make it liberatory or revolutionary? I'm asking you, how does music work, in a sense?
Okay, I think you can change anything a different perspective. Like generally, we see recently, like we have performances from people who take traditional kind of music and make it a love song or any other, or even religious music. So this has happened. I don't know if I've understood your question, but there are people who change music and make it kind of suiting their own. But here in East Africa, we have music that is performed generally as sacred. I'm talking about the Qaswida for the Muslims or Nasheed, or the gospel music for the Christians. And then we have the secular music that is generally consumed by both Christians and Muslims, but in an unreligious kind of way. So that is there. So there is a lot of mixture of, we have people who are basically conservatives who want to just listen to religious music, and you have those people who listen to both, and you have those who don't even listen to religious music, but sacred music, they just want the secular music and they're good with that. Yeah. I don't know if I've answered your question.
Yes. I'm attempting to answer a question too about adaptation of music. I think I made an example about a hymn which was then adapted in the liberation struggle. And so this goes on with all kinds of music, love songs, choral music. There are plenty of examples, especially in choral music, that come to mind. And certainly they do change or influence people's ideas. In the South African context, for instance, the idea of liberation was simply that there must be a negotiation between the oppressors and the oppressed. But revolutionary songs sort of put forward an idea of an armed struggle. Well, the armed struggle was adopted, but there was some conviction in them that the armed struggle would liberate the country from oppression. And so that idea was confirmed by, and that conviction was brought about the music that was created. I growing up in the late 80s and early 90s, I think I was 15 when Mandela was released in 1990. I certainly believe that, no, the SANDF can be defeated by the people. It never crossed my mind that, yeah, SANDF was one of the most powerful armies in the world. So it was about the fight and the AK-47, which I did not even have, by the way. And yeah, again, going back, I'm just thinking right now about some traditional songs which influenced, or which were rather changed and adopted in the revolutionary struggle. There is Soma Gwaza, and there are many other songs that are performed in traditional settings and during traditional ceremonies that gets taken up. Even those that are performed in sports circles, for instance, they all get adapted into the liberation struggles. Sure.
No, thank you. I was about to say that I've been dominating the conversation and asking all the questions, and I'm wondering whether there's quite a few people here that might want to ask questions as well. And I really would like any one of them.
Like, okay, sorry.
Maybe I can just.
Sorry, who's speaking? Does somebody want to ask a question? If you can just indicate to me, if we can. There's Rajab, there's Riaz, there's Purity, there's Olga, there's Arafat. There's quite a few people in the group. Could you please ask our if you want to ask our presenters questions, it would be great. Okay. In the meantime, Robert.
Yes, sorry. Yeah. So I was saying, Arafat, not Arafat. I mean, of course, later on, Malenga will also get to share his presentation. He's also in the group, Tara. But Yahya was to share what actually influences him regarding your question when he's making Qaswida music. Yeah. And respond.
So what makes I call it the lyrics of the poetry that I write in my music. Number one is religion. I also see whatever I see in the society. I have songs that talk about how people should behave, for example, like how the African girl should maybe present herself, or how you should live with the husband. Like I have a song which advises men to help their wives. So these are things that traditionally don't happen in the African society, but these are songs that I do to educate people. So my main aim first is to inspire, educate, and also entertain. So songs basically I do to entertain, like the wedding songs for me are entertainment. There are songs to inspire, to give people hope, like to tell people, like I've written a song that talks about mental distress and how people are facing mental issues at the moment. I've written some poetry talking about how the corona pandemic has made people in this world. So there are generally different subjects that I consider when I'm writing my own list and composing music. And the other kinds of singers and composers in Africa. So people are influenced sometimes by their own life experience. They're influenced by the religion, or they're influenced by whatever genre of kind of music they want to do. Maybe they just want to entertain, educate, or inspire. Thank you.
Thank you, Yahya. We are 2 minutes away from 5 minutes away from lunch break. But I'm wondering if anybody still has any questions or comments that they wish to make. If not,
Ogla.
Sorry.
Yes, I raised my hand.
Oh, I can't see your hand.
Okay.
Please go ahead.
I have one quick question. Thinking about, the different themes and also the inspirations. So particularly the inspirations coming from, what we could call traditions or religion. Is there something like a taboo in those songs. So either, I don't know, themes or a genre of music that are particularly associated with a specific gender, or a topic that should not be touched upon because it is culturally a cultural taboo.
Yahya, you were talking about this very point, and I wonder if you want to expand and answer Olga's question.
Yeah, there are songs that people shun away from because there are topics in Africa that are considered like a taboo, like incest. You cannot sing about incest. Maybe you talk about same-sex marriages. These are topics that people shun away from because they are considered like a taboo in the African society. So as much as you want to sing, there are things that you cannot sing about. Like they're in countries which are in turmoil or they're in war. So there are songs you cannot talk about, maybe like how the leader is, maybe how the leader is oppressing the people, because maybe you'll be arrested, or you cannot talk about the endless corruption in your country. So there are songs that you cannot sing, and there are others that you shun away from because they are considered no goes on for the singer, for his own security. So that is there. I don't know if in South Africa that is the case, but there are songs that people shun away from because fearing their security, or is considered a taboo in African society. Yeah. They cannot touch this. This is maybe too religious or too strong of a topic to talk about. Yes.
Before I let Lindixiwa answer, I just wanted to ask this question. You in one of your answers, you said that you do sing about corruption. Is that true?
Yes. Yes.
So it's not a taboo subject in Kenya then?
Yeah.
In Kenya, we have a little bit of freedom where you can talk about almost anything, but not everything.
Yeah. Actually, there's freedom in Kenya that currently a lot of artists are using it. Even as we are speaking currently, we're nearing the electioneering. So you have found that artists are the people who have really been used to sing songs that will support the leaders to vote for in the next coming general elections. So Kenya actually we've started enjoying the freedom of expression a lot. So most artists are being used to ensure they're being used to support these leaders that want to be supported, and a lot of people will follow them.
Just to make a short comment, you have spoken word artists in Kenya. These are most influential in speaking about the vices and speaking about the vices in the society, especially from the political class. When they make corruption their topic in their songs, and they also talk about the vices, like extrajudicial killings that are happening also in East Africa. So there are topics that these people are able to talk about and go their way without being arrested or anything else. Yeah.
So corruption is not considered a taboo. Yeah.
Thank you. I wonder if Lindixiwa wants to comment on this aspect.
Yeah, I can't think of any taboos especially in revolutionary songs. But again, there are constitutional imperatives. When in my presentation, I mentioned that what made me interested in this subject of liberation songs was that Julius Malema was taken to court because the song is violating the clause about inciting violence. So I thought about many other songs. I mean, even the popular Senzeni in some stanzas of verses, there are a lot of expletives there, swearing. I mean, for instance, I think the last stanza talks about amabhulu zizinja ayakufaz ezizinja. There's boers are dogs and they will die dogs, which is a swear word in especially my language, of course. But we perform, or such songs are performed. There is nothing that prohibits people based on their religion, besides the constitutional mandate.
Yeah.
So to answer your question directly, no.
So if we had to use a sample of just South Africa and Kenya, we would say that there's more freedom of expression now than there was in the past, and that there's much less taboos on how you can express your feelings, your emotions, your convictions through music than at any time previously. Would that be a kind of good way to sum up?
Yes, yes. In Kenya, we have more freedom to talk about whatever we want. Like we can even criticize the president. Like we have not even about songs. We have also artists and comedians who've made fun of the president, and we have animators to predict the current situation in the country and just basically condemn the vices that are being done by the political class. So that is there.
Yeah, and as of course you can say, South Africa has also really been, the music from South Africa currently, in East Africa has really been consumed in Kenya. You have seen that. I think you have been mentioned, like Amapiano. Right now, everywhere Amapiano is being played in East Africa, that is Kenya, and also Tanzania and Kenya. So I think we can, I wanted really to mention that South Africa has really also changed the trajectory of music. We really have to appreciate that. The beats, I think there are transgender, they can really go very far. Kenya is really consuming that market here. So kudos for that. I listen to Amapiano each and every day. So I wanted to also to mention that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't listen to Amapiano. Too old for it.
Okay.
Why?
Why don't you listen
It's
to
too modern.
It's too
Too modern for me.
I listen to Amapiano when it comes on. I don't go make a special trip to go and listen to it, but if it's there, I listen. But
Too much energy.
Too much energy.
Yeah.
But let's mention also East African music as the Benga Kenyan music has influenced the Congolese kind of singing. And,
Yes.
we also find the Kenyan traditional kind of music also has been passed through other countries here. So basically, we have a lot of sharing of African music, not just generally from the European or the Asian countries, but we also have a lot of sharing of music from maybe Egypt. Like we find most Tanzanians, like the Qaswida artists, are adopting more of the kind of singing. So we find there is a lot of sharing in Africa in terms of music. So that's something that is happening, as Robert mentioned. Thank you.
On that point, I want to end because it's about sharing the music and the knowledge and being able to do that with the kind of freedom that you are now enjoying. And that is important in the way in which powerful ideas can be communicated. So I want to thank all the presenters. I also want to thank all the participants, the audience to this particular session, and that we'll meet again in less than an hour's time for the next sessions. And for those that want to continue with this particular theme, please join the sessions where Swahili Port will be doing further performances and explanations of the kind of work that they are doing. Thank you all very much for attending.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Thank you, Prof.
Bye. Bye. Hey, Mohammed, how are you doing?
Thank you.